The cameras had barely gone live when the tension snapped like a whip. Within the first 30 seconds, J.D. Vance leaned forward with that polished politician's smile and declared, "I'm living proof of the American dream. I rose from nothing, and that makes me a true champion for the people." The audience gave a hesitant clap, but Denzel Washington didn't wait. He cut in, his voice firm, clear, and impossible to ignore. "Champion? Don't insult this country with that word." The room went dead quiet. All eyes shifted from Vance to Denzel. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. His tone carried the weight of lived experience. He continued, each word sharper than the last, "A champion sacrifices for others. A champion carries the burdens no one else wants. What you've done is turn your life story into a sales pitch, selling yourself while selling out the very people you claim to defend." Vance blinked, his rehearsed lines slipping away. He tried to laugh it off, waving a hand toward the cameras. "Now, come on, Denzel. That's Hollywood drama. I'm in the Senate. I'm fighting for working families." Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing. "Fighting for them? Or fighting to brand yourself as their savior while cashing in? Because what I see is a man who builds his career on the backs of others' pain. That doesn't make you a champion, it makes you a fraud dressed in patriotic colors." The crowd stirred. A murmur rippled through the studio, half gasps, half applause. Vance opened his mouth, but for the first time, he had no comeback ready. The debate had just begun, but in less than a minute, Denzel had already flipped the script and left Vance cornered. The moderator, sensing the heat rising, tried to steer the conversation toward policy. "Senator Vance, let's talk about your economic plan," but Denzel raised a hand, commanding the room without asking permission. "No, let's stay right here. Because America's tired of politicians dodging the truth with fancy slogans." The audience broke into applause, some even standing. Vance's jaw tightened, his smile turning brittle. "I'm not dodging, Denzel. I'm telling the people my story so they know I understand their struggles." Denzel let out a dry laugh, low and sharp. "Understand? You parade your past like a trophy, but when those same families cry out for help, you're too busy aligning yourself with power brokers to hear them. You don't understand them, you exploit them." Gasps filled the air. The moderator leaned forward, nervous now, but Denzel kept going, his voice gaining force. "You stand on a stage claiming to represent the working man, yet your votes, your speeches, your alliances, they all serve you. You're not lifting anyone up. You're climbing higher while the ladder breaks beneath you." Vance shot back, his words sharp, almost desperate. "And what about you, Denzel? You're an actor. You live in Hollywood mansions. How dare you lecture me about working-class America?" The crowd murmured, waiting for Denzel's response. He didn't hesitate. "I may be an actor, Senator, but I don't act when it comes to truth. My paycheck doesn't erase my responsibility to call out hypocrisy when I see it. The difference between us? I don't pretend to be something I'm not. You do. That's the danger." The studio erupted, cheers, claps, and even a few shouts of, "Tell him, Denzel." Vance shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders tense. For the first time in the night, the senator looked smaller than the role he tried so hard to play. The moderator tried to restore balance, but the energy in the studio had shifted. Denzel leaned forward, eyes locked on Vance, and the silence was thick before he spoke. "You know what really bothers me, Senator? You sell yourself as a champion of faith, family, and country. But every decision you make screams the opposite. Faith? You weaponize it to score political points. Family? You preach values while cutting programs that keep real families alive. Country? You talk about patriotism while standing behind leaders who tear this nation apart." The audience erupted in applause, some even shouting, "That's right." Vance, visibly rattled, attempted to smile through the storm. "That's a nice speech, Denzel. But people don't elect speeches, they elect leaders. And I've been in the trenches while you've been on movie sets." Denzel shook his head, almost pitying him. In the trenches? Senator, you've never been in the mud with the people. You've been in backrooms cutting deals, polishing your image, and chasing clout. Don't tell me about trenches when America's workers are drowning in debt, and you're too busy auditioning for the next big seat in Washington. The camera zoomed in on Vance's face, his smile had cracked. His voice rose, defensive now. You don't understand what it takes to lead. Criticism is easy when you're not the one making choices under pressure. Denzel's reply landed like a hammer. Leadership isn't about chasing titles or climbing the political ladder. It's about sacrifice, humility, and putting others first. And right now, what you're showing America is none of that. You're showing ambition, and ambition without character destroys nations. The studio went silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling in like thunder after lightning. Then, an explosion of cheers shook the set. Vance's hand gripped the arm of his chair as if holding on to control he no longer had. Vance finally snapped. His calm facade shattered as he leaned toward Denzel, jabbing a finger in the air. You think you can sit there, lecture me, and act like you know what's best for America? You're an actor, not a policymaker. You play heroes on screen, but in the real world, men like me carry the weight of this country on our shoulders. His voice was sharp, defensive, and the crowd felt the shift instantly. Denzel didn't flinch. He simply folded his arms and let the senator vent, his silence louder than any words. When the boos started rolling from parts of the audience, Denzel finally leaned forward. You see that, Senator? That's not me talking, that's America reacting. They're tired of leaders who mistake arrogance for strength. You say you carry the weight of this country? The truth is, you carry the weight of your own ambition. The crowd erupted again, half cheers, half gasps. The moderator tried to cut in, but it was too late. This had become a head-to-head showdown. Vance's cheeks flushed red, his jaw tight as he barked back, at least I had the courage to step into the arena. What have you done but criticize from the sidelines? Denzel slammed his palm on the table, his voice booming like a verdict. What have I done? I've used my voice to wake people up, to remind them that integrity matters more than power. And unlike you, Senator, I don't hide behind titles or sell out the people who trusted me. You call that courage? No. Real courage is standing in the fire without betraying those who put you there. The studio audience rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, some even chanting Denzel's name. Cameras panned across the chaos, one man's ego unraveling, another man's conviction holding steady. It was no longer a debate, it was a public reckoning, and Vance was losing control. The moderator's voice trembled as he tried to regain order, but the noise inside the studio had swelled into something closer to a courtroom uproar. Vance, cornered and furious, stood halfway from his chair and jabbed his finger again. You think passion equals wisdom, Denzel? You think yelling louder makes you right? People like me built the policies that keep this nation alive. Without us, you'd have nothing but your speeches and your applause. Denzel leaned forward, his eyes burning with calm precision. Policies, he repeated, letting the word hang in the air. The only policies you've built are the ones that padded your pockets. You've turned politics into a business deal, Senator. And you can scream all you want about carrying America, but the truth is, you've been selling pieces of it for years. Every vote you've cast, every compromise you've made, it wasn't for the people. It was for you. The crowd roared, a wave of cheers mixed with furious boos directed at Vance. Some chanted, "Tell the truth," while others jeered, waving their arms. The camera zoomed in on Vance's tightening jaw, sweat visible under the studio lights. He tried to laugh it off, but the crack in his composure was impossible to ignore. You don't understand how this works. Vance shot back, his voice shaky. This is politics, it's ugly, it's complicated. You can't play saint when you've never had to make those calls. Denzel rose to his feet, towering, his voice slicing through the noise. No, Senator. What I understand is that leadership doesn't mean selling out your people and calling it complicated. It means standing for something even when it costs you everything. And right now, all America sees is a man who thinks betrayal is strategy." The entire room froze for a moment before exploding into deafening cheers. The camera cut to Vance, frozen mid-scowl, his power slipping with every second. The atmosphere inside the studio felt electric, like static before a lightning strike. The moderator's pleas were drowned out as the audience surged forward with their reactions, some shouting Vance's name, others chanting Denzel's words back at him like gospel. The clash had gone beyond debate, it was raw theater, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Vance straightened his jacket, forcing a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You talk a lot about betrayal, Denzel," he sneered, trying to regain footing. "But let's be honest, you don't carry the responsibility I do. You don't sit in that chamber with lobbyists breathing down your neck, with industries threatening jobs, with foreign leaders waiting for weakness. You sit in Hollywood, giving speeches that cost you nothing." Denzel's response was sharp, immediate. "Hollywood didn't send our sons and daughters to wars they didn't need to fight. Hollywood didn't cut healthcare while pocketing donations from pharma giants. Hollywood didn't treat the American people like pawns on a chessboard. That was you, Senator. That was the political machine you protect, the one you feed off of." The crowd erupted again, some standing, clapping, even stomping their feet against the studio floor. Vance tried to interrupt, but his words were drowned in the roar. His face reddened, his hand slammed the desk. "You're twisting everything," he barked, his voice cracking. Denzel leaned forward, his tone lower, deliberate. "No. I'm shining a light. And the truth doesn't twist, it exposes." The silence that followed lasted only a beat before it was broken by thunderous applause. Vance looked around, realizing the momentum had shifted entirely, the control he thought he had slipping like sand through his fingers. The tension in the studio had reached a point where every sound felt amplified, the shuffle of papers, the hum of the cameras, even the uneasy coughs from the audience. Vance's forced smirk had faded completely now, leaving only the flush of frustration creeping up his neck. He leaned toward the microphone, trying to claw back control. "You think it's that simple, Denzel? You think standing there with your righteous speeches makes you some kind of savior? You don't know what it takes to sit in my chair." Denzel's laugh was sharp, hollow, almost mocking. He leaned back, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on Vance with the kind of stare that cuts deeper than any insult. "Sit in your chair? Senator, the problem isn't the seat you're in, it's the way you abuse it. That chair was built on the blood and sweat of Americans who believed their leaders would fight for them, not sell them out for a headline or a handout. You turned it into a throne of self-interest." The audience roared in agreement, clapping and shouting. Some even stood, chanting Denzel's name in unison, their voices rattling the studio walls. Vance shook his head violently, trying to shout over the crowd, "That's a lie. Everything you're saying is a distortion." But Denzel cut him off, his voice booming with a clarity that silenced even the audience for a split second. "Distortion? No, Senator. The distortion is your version of America, the one where people like you win, and the people who trusted you lose. You call yourself a champion, but you're nothing but a counterfeit. A fake hero in a suit too expensive for the people you claim to represent." Gasps filled the studio, followed by thunderous applause. Vance's jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and for a moment it looked like he might walk off the stage. But he didn't, he stayed, burning red with rage, trapped in the firestorm Denzel had ignited. The studio lights seemed hotter now, almost unforgiving, as if they too were bearing down on Senator Vance. He leaned forward, his voice strained, spitting out words meant to wound. "You're an actor, Denzel. That's all you'll ever be. You don't know the weight of real responsibility, you've never had to carry the future of this country on your shoulders." His tone trembled, not with conviction, but with desperation, the kind of edge that betrayed fear more than strength. Denzel didn't flinch. He took a slow step toward the table between them, his shadow stretching across the polished surface. His voice, calm but unyielding, carried through the room like a judge delivering a verdict. "And you, Senator, have forgotten what responsibility means. You confuse titles with duty. You think wearing a pin on your lapel makes you a patriot. But the truth is, you've built your career on shortcuts and slogans, not sacrifice. That's not leadership, that's theater. And bad theater at that. The audience exploded, clapping, whistling, some even chanting, "Denzel. Denzel." The chant grew louder, shaking the atmosphere with raw energy. Vance's face twisted, his eyes darting toward the cameras, as if searching for an escape from the moment he could feel spiraling out of his control. Denzel raised his hand, and remarkably, the crowd fell silent again. He looked directly at Vance, his voice dropping lower, sharper, cutting like a blade. America doesn't need another fraud pretending to fight for them while lining his own pockets. They need leaders who will bleed for the truth, not bend for the spotlight. And that, Senator, is why this moment is bigger than you, bigger than me. Tonight, the mask came off, and everyone saw who you really are. Vance sat frozen, lips parted but no words forming. The silence lasted only a beat before the audience erupted again, this time in a standing ovation that left no doubt, the battle was over, and Denzel had claimed the stage. The studio was no longer just a stage, it had turned into a courtroom of ideas, and the jury was the American people. Vance, red in the face, tried one last desperate angle. He leaned forward, voice rising, "You call me a fake champion, but what have you done? You make speeches, you win awards, but when it comes to the real fight for families, where were you?" His words carried the sharpness of someone who knew he was cornered, a man clinging to any rope left dangling. But Denzel didn't flinch. He calmly removed his glasses, set them on the table, and looked Vance dead in the eyes. "I was out there," Denzel replied slowly, deliberately, "building hope where your kind of politics built nothing but resentment. I was talking to young men in prisons, telling them they mattered. I was showing kids in forgotten neighborhoods that success wasn't a lie. You built a platform on anger and dressed it up as service." The silence that followed was deafening. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing that Vance had run out of tricks. Then, suddenly, a veteran in the front row stood up and shouted, "That's the truth. I lived through your policies, Senator." The eruption of applause that followed nearly shook the rafters. Cameras caught Vance's hands trembling as he reached for his water glass, his polished image of composure finally shattered. The moderator, overwhelmed by the energy, simply leaned back and let the spectacle unfold. In that moment, it wasn't about politics, or ideology, it was about authenticity. And Vance had lost it, the climax hit like a hammer. The debate had become raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. Vance tried to gather himself, slamming his hand on the desk. "You don't know the first thing about sacrifice, Denzel. You live in Hollywood, not the heartland." His voice cracked, desperation dripping from every syllable. But Denzel leaned forward, his tone quiet yet razor sharp, the kind of calm that cuts deeper than shouting. "Sacrifice," he repeated. "I buried friends who fought in wars this country sent them to, only to come home and be forgotten. I walked through neighborhoods gutted by policies you defended, where mothers worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Don't you dare lecture me about sacrifice. You turned pain into campaign slogans." The crowd erupted, half cheering, half gasping, their energy boiling over as the tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. The camera zoomed in on Vance's face, pale, sweat glistening under the stage lights, his mouth opening but no words coming out. For once, the senator known for his rehearsed lines had none. Meanwhile, Denzel's voice rose above the chaos, steady, commanding, undeniable. "America doesn't need another fake champion chasing power. It needs truth. It needs leaders who don't just talk about the people, but walk with them." The studio roared like thunder, the sound echoing as if the entire country was clapping through the screen. The moderator tried to restore order, but it was too late, the moment belonged to Denzel. Vance, slouched in his chair, looked less like a senator and more like a man who had just lost the only argument that mattered. The headline was already writing itself. "Fake champion exposed, Denzel shuts down Vance on live TV. Tonight wasn't about politics, it was about truth. We watched a man try to wear the title of a champion while selling out the very people he claimed to represent. And we watched another man, Denzel, strip away the lies with nothing but courage and clarity. Remember this: leaders aren't crowned by money or power. They're defined by whether they stand with the people when it matters most. America deserves nothing less, and tonight, you saw that truth live.